Hello, this is Wes Bridle, and this is another Kingdom Calling Economic Update video. I'm going to have to be fast on this one because I've got a lot to cover. This is the second in a series of two that we're doing since the birth of my son, so we're going real big picture on these videos. This one I'm going to call the Eye of the Storm, and again, all these videos are follow-ups to the Coming Storm video we shot in November. There's a link for you to go watch that for free. If you haven't seen it, you really need to, because it really talks about what's going to happen in our economy and in our whole world fundamentally. It's important information for you, and I really recommend you do that. This is just the small things that have happened in the last 6 weeks, although I'm hitting on the biggest news stories of the last 6 weeks. In this, I'm going to start this one a little different. If you're familiar with the Jewish calendar, we are in the year 5770. And I bring that up because I saw something interesting recently. Casey Research has often talked about us being in the eye of the storm. And I, of course, before I started seeing that, I called my video The Coming Storm. I've never really talked about the eye of the storm until I just heard this recently. 5770, apparently that year is called the year of the eye. And so I found that pretty fascinating. So now I'm going to jump right into this. The Chinese credit agency Daigong has now started to rate countries. So whereas before it's mostly U.S. countries, there's probably some European ones. The big ones I always hear about are the U.S. companies that rate different countries and companies around the world. Well, now this Chinese company has gotten into the act, and they came out and they rated the U.S. AA. So, you know, of course, we've always been AAA, but it's realistic for them to look at us and say, we have serious issues, and so they only rated us AA. I would say we don't deserve that, but that was kind of interesting that they came out and did this. Portugal and Ireland, when we're on the subject of ratings, were downgraded by Moody's. So again, big problems in Europe, and I want to say a few things about Europe. European banks are in trouble. Their debts are not securitized the way many U.S. bank debts are. When a U.S. bank does a mortgage, they often tie that up with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. It's sold off and securitized, so they don't really have that burden of whether or not the payer is going to pay or not. European banks have all that on their books, so they're in trouble. And so let's see, Spanish councils, which are kind of regional governments in Spain, are going broke. They're going to need to be bailed out, much like states in the U.S. are going to be bailed out here. There's 1.65 trillion in Eurozone bank debt coming due within the end of this year and in 2011. That's a massive number of money. If that money has to be refinanced at a higher rate, it's going to kill those banks. Well, what do we know? When banks start going under, countries start stepping in. It's going to kill the countries and the economies. The EU orders Germany to count the holdings of failed banks on their books as government debt. This is a huge thing, and it really shoots up the amount of debt in Germany. Germany is always considered a fairly conservative country because they have less debt, less deficit than a lot of the Western countries, but you add this debt to their books and all of a sudden they're kind of high on debt like we are. Now, of course, we don't add those type of things. We're basically guaranteeing Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and a whole lot of other companies and agencies. If you add those two agencies, that's $6 trillion added to our $13 trillion of debt. You can see how ugly it would be if we were playing that game, which we ought to. That's honest accounting, but the governments don't like to look at things honestly. Greek banks saw that 8% of their capital disappeared here recently. And some of that's capital flight, people in Greece feeling unsafe, so they moved their money to Switzerland or Germany or whatever. But a lot of it was just the Greek people spending down their savings. So that's kind of a scary thing. Unemployment in some places in Greece is at 70%. There's rumors of countries ending their austerity plans. So Spain, you know, talks about a big game about how they're going to tighten their belt. They're already talking about not doing those things anymore. All these European countries, there's a no-win situation. If they tighten their belts, the economy tanks. If they don't tighten their belts, the currency crashes. We're all in a no-win situation at this point. And I'm sorry if that sounds gloomy, but if you just look at the economics, the finances of it, there's really no other solution. There's no way out rationally other than to close your eyes to the situation that we're in and just hope for the best, that things are all going to get good because you don't really know what's happening. And then, you know, the last thing is probably going to get started up again because the problem countries are the ones in the Mediterranean. Greece, Portugal, and Spain get tons of vacationers in the summer. So they have all this money flooding into those countries in the summer. Well, that's start to dry up soon, and now we'll start to see problems in those countries again very soon. I'm going to just talk about a few economic indicators. Obviously, there's a ton that come out all the time. The ECRI, which is one of the biggest economic indicators, is down. What it's showing, the levels it's showing, the negative levels. The country always goes into recession when it shows these things. Real estate, every statistic that comes out recently is like the worst on record. Real estate is absolutely in horrible condition. Real estate activity is down 75%. And real estate's really one of the biggest components of the economy. If the economy was down 25%, we'd call it a depression. Real estate's down 75%. What is that? Household employment is down. May, June, and July is down big. When it's down 3 months in a row, there's a 98% chance of recession, according to Dave Rosenberg. So again, we're going back into recession. We never really left, but statistically, we sort of left. Employment rate fell to 58.4%. So 58.4% of the people are working, that want to be working. And so that's right where we were at the beginning of the year before we had this so-called recovery. It shows you kind of an ugly situation. A lot of times the numbers that come out show, oh, we've added jobs, we've added jobs. Well, you have to add jobs. I just heard on the radio today that we've added, I don't remember the exact number, but 4 million people were born this year. In order just to keep up with the growth rate of the population, you have to add, I think it's like 125,000 jobs a month. I believe that's the number. So when they come out and say they added 77,000 jobs, well, that's sort of like negative 50,000 to the number of people that want to be working. Okay, M3 money supply, so it's a broad measure of money supply, is down 8.8% year over year, and that is the sharpest decline since World War II. That, again, always shows recession is coming when that happens. Oil prices jumped 100% year over year, and again, that's a 100% indicator of recession. Fewer homes being sold now than in 1963, and that's just as long as we have record. Could be farther back than that. If you think about how much smaller this country was in 1963, and we're selling fewer homes now, that's unbelievable. So I don't want to keep doing the doom and gloom economic indicators, but that's just a reality that gives you a big picture of what's going on economically out there if you need some hard facts. The reality is that we're in a situation worse than a recession. In the 1930s, the Great Depression, in the 70s, in the early 80s, jobs came back. In this one, jobs aren't coming back. Government workers now, if you're a government worker, you're in good shape. You're making twice as much money as a private citizen working for a private company. The problem with that is the government doesn't produce anything. So it doesn't benefit the economy in any way if government workers are being paid, because that's actually a drain on the people that are producing something in the economy. So that's not good economically. Paychecks, your paycheck is going to be shrinking depending on if you work for somebody, or even if you work for yourself and your bills are up, that basically means your paycheck shrunk. The new health care bill kicks in. It's going to cost everyone more. The Democrats, when they were selling this, said it was going to make everyone's costs go down. They're no longer even trying to pretend like that's going to happen. They're now just admitting that, yes, it's going to cost more, but now they're trying to convince us it'll be better health care. Whatever, it doesn't matter. 63% of business owners, of course, say they're going to pass those costs along because they can't afford it. California, government workers must take time off without pay. You've probably heard about that, but California, a bunch of states, Illinois, those are the two biggest, but a lot of them are having serious problems. Again, I don't see how the U.S. government isn't going to try to pay for this. The food stamp usage is at record levels. Riots recently in Atlanta and Detroit just trying to get on the government dole. Wheat prices are skyrocketing, which is going to mean other foods are going to cost more. We're heading into a very serious place. I hope you're taking this seriously. Stocks, September is the weakest historical month for the stock market. So I personally think it's about to crash. I've been saying this for a long time. I think we're about in that time where it's going to crash. Bond market, if we stay in deflation, you'll probably make money in the bond market. The second hyperinflation type thing hits, you'll lose money badly in that. So be careful out there. Make sure you know what you're doing and what you're invested in. This year, 5770 is the year of the eye. It ends September 9th. I don't know what that means, but I find that incredibly interesting, and I'll be paying attention. Hope you've enjoyed this. Again, if you haven't seen The Coming Storm, go watch that video. There's a link to do that for free.